In today's episode, Maria asks, trying to ramp up a new service offering via webinar. Target audience is parents of high schoolers. We are trying to prove the concept out with a small monthly budget and doing regularly scheduled live webinars. Also, we'll try Facebook ads. Any tips for B2C webinar marketing? If the webinar is not ever-changing information, you may actually want to look into what's called a hybrid webinar, which allows you to do a pre-recorded session and then have someone available live for Q&A afterwards. That might be something you want to look into. Webinar marketing in general it's essentially event marketing in a lot of ways, except that the customer doesn't have to go anywhere. Instead of showing up to a hotel or a conference room, whatever, they can sit at their desk or their TV or whatever and enjoy the content there. Now, with webinars, a webinar is still a time commitment, right? It's a micro sale of its own. What's in it for the customer? The key to webinar marketing, unsurprisingly, is to have incredibly clear value proposition. Why should somebody spend 15, 30, 45 minutes of their time to enjoy this thing, assuming it is enjoyable, knowing full well it's probably going to be a sales pitch, right? So you get all those things like timeshare emails and stuff on the B2C side, and you're like, I know exactly what this is, and I'm not going to do it because it's just going to be a long sales pitch, and that's what people are afraid of. So you have to alleviate that fear. How do you alleviate that fear? You essentially build a value chain or a trust chain, which means that you have to get people to the webinar through a series of steps. Typically, you're going to use things like content marketing, social media posts that lead to blog posts, that lead to short videos on YouTube, that lead to webinars, because at each step along the way, you have to prove that you're not going to waste people's time. So give that some thought in terms of the value chain, that chain of trust. How do you get smaller commitments laddering up to the webinar to earn that trust so that people will be willing to spend the time on it? I don't know that for a situation like this that a webinar is the best choice. Because if we're talking true B2C, meaning your average person who is out at the end of the day, they're home, they're ready to watch some stuff, depending on what the product is, and I don't know what the product is, that doesn't necessarily fit with how people consume content. What does your viewing habits look like at the end of the workday? Right? Give some thought to that. Yeah, depending on what kind of job you have, you might have different things, but a lot of people do Netflix and chill, right? Or Hulu, or Amazon Prime Video, or whatever. But a lot of people just sit on the couch, veg out, and tune out, and just they're there to be entertained and amused. So asking somebody to sit down for a live webinar at the end of the day may not be the best way to reach somebody. What could you do in a situation like that? Think about what would it look like if this was a season of Black Mirror, right? What would this look like if this was a season of House of Cards? Now, I'm not saying you need to go and produce a mega drama, but I am saying the habits of people and the way that they behave leans more towards that mini-series that somebody could binge watch. That's what people do. And so could your content, which is parents of high schoolers, could it be reformatted to be something they could binge watch in? Maybe it's not an hour each. Maybe it's 10-minute chunks. Because that also would be compatible with people's browsing habits during the workday. If you're working at a 9 to 5, and you work at like Target, right? your break is not an hour long. No, unless you're like the manager. But your break comes split up throughout the day. If you work at the local grocery store, your break is 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch break. Does your content fit into that? Does your content fit to the way that people commute? A live webinar is a big chunk of commitment compared to a series on YouTube, compared to a series on the video platform of your choice, compared to something that somebody can binge watch. So give some thought to that, because I'm not convinced that this is the right path for B2C for some kind of a service offering where you would otherwise ask people to sit through 45 minutes of something. Even if it's 30 minutes, that's still a good chunk of time. Again, give some thought to this. If you were not working at this company, would you spend 30 minutes of your lunch break on this? When was the last time on your lunch break you watched a webinar? Right? If the answer is never, it's not a good indicator. Now, find some people who are parents of high schoolers. Ask them, when was the last time you watched a webinar? And see what the answer is. If you're willing to spend some budget, I would actually suggest running a survey first, using something like Google Consumer Surveys or SurveyMonkey, and surveying parents of high school students. That'd be your first question, your screening question. Are you the parent of a high school student? 2, when was the last time that you watched a webinar? And I would have your choices be, in the last week, in the last month, in the last quarter, in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months, in the last year, and what's a webinar? And I think you'll be pretty surprised at how many people will choose what's a webinar. So run that survey first before you invest in a whole lot of money into this thing, and give some thought to formatting your content to be the way that your average B2C person, the way they live. Especially since, for at least within the United States, there is a substantial portion of people who work in non-white collar jobs where they don't have the ability to sit down for that long. But they do have smartphones, and they do have YouTube, and they do have Netflix. So give that some thought. And if you go that route, build that value chain, build that trust chain, and make sure that your value proposition is 100% clear, and it's something that people desperately want. So, good question. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a real tough one. As always, please leave your comments below in the comments box, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the newsletter. I'll talk to you soon.
Want help solving your company's data analytics and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.